Hello and welcome to the NFU's Shed Talks podcast. I'm Bizza Walters and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host Luke Cox.
Hello Bizza, it's great to be back and I'm excited to be hosting this episode with you.
Coming up in today's pod, we speak to two farmers who've lived to tell the tale after severe accidents on farm. We discussed just what needs to be done to make a real and lasting change to British farming's poor safety record after another year of worrying health and safety statistics. People
are so busy, they're tired mentally, physically, they're drained, they're not as aware of what's going on because they're tired because they've got so much work to get through. They become lackadaisical and they take their eye off the ball and they don't assess the situation. But that 3 seconds could save you 6 months, 18 months of a recovery or a fatality.
Our Westminster team takes a closer look at what is happening in the world of farming and politics as we get closer to Budget Day and the Chancellor's update on inheritance tax.
Next Thursday it'll be the turn of Emma Reynolds, Angela Eagle and Emma Hardy to come to Parliament and answer questions. So we will be hard at work trying to get lots of questions in, obviously about the family farm tax.
And we spoke to a farm machinery expert about the latest kit on show at Agritechnica in Germany this month.
All these weird, wonderful things that we look at and think, there's no way that will ever come to the UK. There's no way we'll see that here. It tends to find its way here, or technology involved in it does.
Bizza, it's lovely to see you again. You're looking a bit better than you did when we recorded our features last week.
Yeah, I was really under the weather. I spent my previous weekend surrounded by lots of children who like to give you horrible bugs. So spent a few days in bed feeling a bit under the weather. But my mum did say it was good for the pre-Christmas diet. So I'll take that.
It's great to hear you've recovered fairly quickly from feeling unwell. Apart from being unwell, how's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good, thank you. Spent most of it in bed, as I've just discussed, but back up and running now. Still had all the animals to do. So, all the horses, the sheep, the dogs. My dad's actually had an operation as well, so even more of a workload. It's a good job I've bounced back. But as we actually discussed as well, one of the things I saw in the news was the record broken for the biggest pumpkin, which I think came back at just over 1.2 tons. Yeah, 1,278.8 kilograms. And we discussed, didn't we, that my dad has been drying out his giant pumpkin seeds and his giant squash seeds because that's his hobby. That's what he loves to do is grow giant veg. And I accidentally got the labels mixed up on the trays when he was drying them on the Arga, which didn't go down very well. It's not the reason he's in hospital for an operation.
Shouldn't have been touching those, Bizza.
I know, I shouldn't have been messing with them, but I was just trying to piece together which piece of paper he'd used for these labels because I was like, if this is one of mine, I'm not going to be very happy. But anyway, he came in, had a bit of a palpitation moment and managed to rectify it and all is fine. How about you, Luke? How has your week been? What have you been up to?
Well, it's good to hear, Bizza, that didn't turn into a full family domestic. I've had a very busy week, actually. Last week was NFU Council, so I was working very closely with Jamie Bowes, the Crops Board Chair, on his presentation to Council. But I think just also getting to be part of Council and see what's going on. I'm not actually allowed in the room as a staff member, but I went across to the conference centre 10 minutes before they all went in, and you get a real feel of the buzz of all the members who are representing their counties going into Council to discuss the key issues to them. And I get to meet lots of people that I know from inside the farming world that I've connected through young farmers or my local farming world. And it's a fantastic opportunity to see sort of the buzz of the NFU really working. So that was a really good start to last week. And then later on in the week, I went to one of our members' farms, Will Oliver, in the Midlands. And that was with the Red Tractor Sector Board, which is made up of not just farmers, but also representatives from across the whole supply chain. And we almost conducted a mock audit so that we could see exactly how an on-farm audit might go. For us as farmers, we've obviously seen them more often, but for some people in the supply chain, they wouldn't have seen them at all. So it was really nice to get everyone sort of understanding what farmers have to do in a farm audit and the realities of what actually happens on farm. So that was really exciting. And there's lots of work going on at the moment on fairness in the supply chain as well in the crop sector. We are still waiting on the promised supply chain fairness consultation that we were assured would come out before the end of this year. So we're in mid-November now, so time is fast running out. And I'm really hoping they don't launch it on Christmas Day.
Goodness me, Luke, you are such a vat of knowledge. I'm so pleased I've been paired with you, because that would probably not go straight over my head, but you just get so into it and I love it. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
No problem at all. It's there's lots going on in the world of policy, but it's always interesting to keep in contact with the various stuff that's going on in the world of the NFU.
Also, just coming back quickly, you mentioned Will Oliver. I did a Just Farmers media training course with him, and I believe as well that he is this year's British Farming Awards Arable Farmer of the Year. So great place for you to be for that Red Tractor meeting.
Definitely. Will's a fantastic farmer. He's got loads of different enterprises on his farm. He's diversified lots over the years. He's also an excellent public speaker and speaks at loads of different events, big events like Groundswell and cereals. So he's an excellent advocate for the farming industry, and really interesting to get out and see his farm in person as well.
And an all-round nice guy as well.
We had some great features, Bizza, this week, and the first one was the farm safety chat. So we were joined by Callum Lindsay, who was involved in a quad bike accident in Scotland, and Ed Caldwell, who had a near-death accident with an angle grinder in New Zealand. So should we hear what they had to say?
Yeah, let's go for it. Some pretty harrowing stuff, but incredibly important. Farm safety is often overlooked until something goes wrong. This episode focuses on real experiences that show how quickly situations can turn very serious and the practical lessons farmers can apply immediately.
So we're joined here by Callum Lindsay and Ed Caldwell, who have both got stories about farm safety incidents. Ed, do you mind going first? Just very briefly tell us what happened to you.
Yeah, so a number of years ago now, I left uni and college and I zipped over, as many farmers do, to Australia and New Zealand. Had an amazing time out there. I love my time in Australia. I did about 6 months out there. And then I zipped over to New Zealand to do a little bit more work in the South Island, not too far away from Ashburton and Christchurch and sort of central South Island there. And whilst on that farm, I was angle grinding, as was part of my role. And some of the long and rather painful story short, I managed to lose control of it, and I ended up cutting straight through my femoral artery, which is the main sort of vessel that runs sort of down the inside of my left leg. It happened in half a second, probably less. And ultimately, it was my own fault. It was an accident. I was fortunate whereby I had my phone in my pocket at the time. Before I lost too much blood, consciousness, and so on, I was able to call for help. And I really don't remember a tremendous amount else up until about a week later, when I woke up from a medically induced coma in Christchurch Hospital. There was a number of resuscitations. There was blood transfusions, pretty much you name it. I've pretty well had it, and that was almost 7 years ago now. Fortunately, very much still around and still of annoyance to my parents, and still contributing to the farm. But it was certainly a point in my life that was very close to very bad news, unfortunately. And farm safety has been quite an important part of my life and how I conduct myself on the farm since then.
And just quickly, sorry to jump in, is angle grinding something that you'd done for years before that? Like, it was not the first time you picked up an angle grinder, is it?
Far from it. So and it could be one of the challenges itself. I was quite familiar with angle grinding. It's quite a normal part of the job. As I said, it happened very, very quickly. It was my own fault. What happened was I was angle grinding through a piece of vertical bar, and as I got through the bar, it sort of pinched a little bit. And as it pinched, the blade split, and it flipped up to the left-hand side quite violently. And it's quite a heavy bit of kit, an angle grinder. So I lost control of it, and it just went straight through my left leg. It was, don't get me wrong, very unfortunate, unlucky, and whatever else. But ultimately, there was no one else there but myself to blame for that.
Appreciate you sharing that, Ed, and yeah, incredibly traumatic experience. We'll delve a bit more into the impact of that. But Callum, can you share your story with us, please?
Yep, so I moved to the island of Arran almost 3 years ago now. I had my ATV accident 2 years ago. I'm a beef and sheep upland farmer in a remote part of Scotland. It's probably classed as more remote than some of the Outer Hebrides, with its medical links being closer to the mainland, which makes it more vulnerable. But I was out shifting sheep in adverse weather conditions where I hit a stone in bracken that was disclosed, and I came over the handlebars, put my face into the front rack and rolling over onto my neck. I sustained fractures to C1 and C2, which are the two top vertebrae in your neck, and then round about my nose socket. My nose was pretty well broken. I was on my own. It's a remote location, but it was a remote bit of the farm with no phone signal. I had my phone with me, but couldn't call for help. When I came back round, I had gained consciousness after coming off the bike. The dogs that I was working with me at the time were all back, and the sheep that we were shifting in the bad weather were away to safety. So I managed to get onto the bike and get close enough to the hill farm to phone my wife for help, and she got me to the local hospital, where I was airlifted and taken over to Cross House on the mainland. I was there for a wee while, and then I came home, and unfortunately, very fortunately, I'd never had a nosebleed until this point in my life, where my nose bled very furiously, and the cartilage had became detached in my nose socket, where I was rushed back to hospital and packed and transferred back to the mainland to get my nose reconstructed once the swelling went down. It was a slow recovery, but the recovery on my behalf wasn't the biggest impact. It was more the impact that I had on the farm and on the family.
And that's something I wanted to touch on, actually, is that obviously for both of you, you physically had some horrendous injuries and an awful experience. But without you both, or, you know, in your case, especially Callum, without you, the farm couldn't run properly, because you knew the ins and outs of it. You knew what sheep needed to go off to market. You knew when you were needing to put the tups in, whatever it might have been. And then suddenly you've got a wife and two small kids, haven't you? So you're suddenly relying on them to do everything for you. So it's such a bigger impact than it just affecting you.
People think that having an accident, it's over and done with, it affects you, but it's everybody around you that actually affects greater than yourself. You've had your accident, you're mentally dealing with it yourself, but it's the mental pressure that is put on your whole family and everybody in the workplace round about you, that people don't realise that it has a bigger impact as well.
When you were both recovering in that time period, can you think of examples of things that you missed out on? Not necessarily farm things, could be family things that you were perhaps unable to do because you were recovering from your injuries.
Well, I think, just touching on what Callum said there, I think one of my biggest regret about my accident isn't necessarily my own physical condition now, but my father remembers a time when I was in a critical condition, still in my coma, and he flew out from the UK to New Zealand. And he remembers landing in Abu Dhabi and having to phone the hospital in Christchurch to check whether his son was alive. That was a very difficult flight for him. Obviously there's no phone signal up in the air. And he said it was a really difficult experience, let alone I was the other side of the world. My brother and my sister, there's really nothing they could do about it except for stay by the phone and wait for updates in the middle of the night from New Zealand at the opposite side of the world. As for missing out, I think that sort of gap year, that travel time in my life obviously was cut short. I had to come home and focus on my recovery. I probably should have been seeing some great things and some different cultures and foods and sights and sounds and smells, or whatever, whilst you're young and have the ability to do that. So I certainly missed out on that.
And Callum, any things you missed out on in that recovery time?
Yeah, I would say, it's my biggest regret of it is, we probably didn't get as good a quality time as a family, although we don't really go and do very much because of our location where we are. But that time spent with the family working, I was recovering, and my wife and my kids were trailing around about a hill, chasing sheep and sorting cows, which it comes back to, it put the leading volume of pressure on them rather than me.
And how did you both find the sort of mental side of that? I know certainly even the small things at home, when I'm sat unable to go and physically get out and help people or get involved with something, I find it quite frustrating. Obviously, you had no choice. You were spending months recovering from your injuries. I mean, from the mental side of things, how did you cope with not being able to actually get out there and physically help out with the things that you're so used to doing and so used to being part of your daily life?
My biggest struggle was, you knew previously you were fit, and it was getting your head round about it mentally that you weren't fit to do it, or you needed a lot of assistance and help from friends and neighbours and family to get through your recovery, because unfortunately, you're laid up, but the work doesn't stop. You've got a duty of care to livestock and the responsibility of a business to run, and it's very sad, but the bank don't really care whether you've had an accident or not. They still want their payments in, and the show has to go on. I ended up doing quite a bit with the Yellow Wellies Farm Safety Foundation, and I find their slogan very, very fitting. Who fills your boots? It gives you a massive change of mental mindset into how you do things on a daily basis. You become far more safety conscious, and you prioritize things completely differently than you did previously. I think it's not how you recover, it's how it changes your whole mental mindset. And I think it's dealing with that in a manner which sometimes I struggled. I was very crabbit. I had a lot of brain fog and fatigue. Is not just your mindset and mental health that it affects, and I found that sometimes I had to rechange how I was reacting in that to situations, and a lot of it was frustration because I wasn't fit to do it.
I appreciate you sharing that, Callum, and like you said, it's not just that one impact. You've both articulated this really well. It's the many months afterwards as well. Ed, any comments on that side of the recovery?
Yeah, look, the recovery is very slow, particularly whilst you're going through it. Your body takes a tremendous amount of time to heal, and whilst it's healing, you really do two things with your time. Is one, you sit around and feel a bit like a spare part, particularly for farmers who are often on their feet or flying about doing whatever that you're doing. To go from that to being really stationary and just giving your body that necessary time to heal is particularly difficult. And then the other thing you have to do is, hospital is your best and worst friend. Best because that's where you need to be in order to heal. But whilst you're here healing, really all you have to do is sit around and think about some of the mistakes that you made, and that's quite difficult as well, knowing that you probably should be doing other things. And frankly, of course, it was an accident, but it is what it is. So, as Callum mentioned, the job goes on, and it must have been difficult for Callum in his isolated position where he is geographically. But you certainly do spend a tremendous amount of time thinking that I'm not really contributing here. I am somewhat of a dependent, and that's beyond the physical challenges. That's difficult to get your head round psychologically and emotionally.
So we know that people are taking risks on farms still. They're under time pressure. Lack of profitability means that people are unfortunately cutting corners. So what would you say to someone that says that farm safety just isn't important to them?
I think it'd probably be important just to look at the statistics. We're constantly trying to progress our businesses to try to do better. But as an industry, moving forward, as a community, as a team, we have a real chance to make farming safer, reduce the injuries, reduce the fatalities, and make it fun again.
Thank you. Callum?
I feel that, if somebody comes away with a remark that farm safety isn't important, that you reiterate to them some of the stories and horrific accidents that I became aware of, and share them with them, and try and change their mindset to a manner where they actually appreciate farm safety. It only takes them a minute to assess the situation and then reduce their risk in the workplace, or because if they're there, they're discussing it or with you, that they can put themselves slightly out of danger, and reduce their chance of having an accident or becoming a statistic.
Callum, you mentioned Yellow Wellies or the Farm Safety Foundation, and I think we're really fortunate as an industry to have some amazing charities that are combating this and trying to tackle it day after day, both physical and mental well-being. But since April, we're aware of 19 people that have died on UK farms. So these accidents are still happening, and it's costing people's lives. I don't know about you guys, but I see it on social media all the time. There's just a report of another accident or another death. And I just think, are people actually becoming a bit blasé about it now? I mean, it's not the attitude we should be having, of course, but what can we do to actually make people wake up and realise that we need to be doing more to protect ourselves?
I totally agree. There is far too many people sustaining either severe injuries or fatalities on farms, but I think it also comes back down to, if you go back 50 years ago, a lot of big farms would have a shepherd, a tractorman, a cattleman, or whatever, depending on the setup. But now it's not financially viable. Now one man's trying to do three men's work or farm a larger volume of ground, and it people are so busy, they're tired mentally, physically, they're drained, but they've got no option barring continue and push forward to try and make a living. You know, if you go back far enough, a man can make a living from 20 cows and 100 sheep or 100 acres of barley, is where now one man's trying to combine 1,000 acres of barley or run 2,500 cows and 100 cows. It's becoming far more difficult for somebody in agriculture to make a sustainable living, never mind a young person starting out. And I think that's when these accidents are happening. You know, people are tired. They're not as aware of what's going on because they're tired, because they've got so much work to get through, become lackadaisical, and they take their eye off the ball and they don't assess the situation. You know, as Ed said, it's a split second. It's not even a second, bang, accident. They tend not to be, I've cut my finger. They tend to be severe accidents. And it's changing the mental mindset of just take 2 seconds. And you know, it's like putting a helmet on. It only takes 3 seconds. But that 3 seconds could save you 6 months, 18 months of a recovery or a fatality.
Really powerful message, thank you. Before we wrap up, just worth sort of mentioning, Ed, since you've you had your accident, you've recovered, you've raised over £4,000 for mental health charities, taking on quite an impressive marathon, didn't you, not too long ago?
Yeah, after my accident, it was very much a case of, you know, you get up and you stand up, and then all of a sudden, a few months later, you're doing a 5K, and then you're doing a 10K, and then in April, I ran something called the Marathon des Sables, which is 250K through the Sahara Desert. So that was raised a bit of money for the yellow wellies, as Callum alluded to. I have my health gratefully, and I'm trying my best to continue and move forward after that accident.
And Callum, we're going to hear more from you and your story on BBC's This Farming Life in the new year.
Yeah, we're having a wee bit of a go with Farming Life, BBC documentary, so it's released in January. The whole place will be for show.
Fantastic. Look forward to seeing it.
So the NFU have come up with the slogan "Take 5 to stay alive," and this is where you take 5 minutes, not even, maybe just 5 seconds to stop and think, what can I do to make this certain activity that I'm about to undertake safer? So what would you both say is your take 5 to stay alive on farm, starting with you, Ed?
I mean, without question, the most valuable thing that we can do is just stop for a second, take a step back, assess the situation. And it will probably be a challenging thing to do at first. It will always be difficult to change a lifetime of how we go about doing our job. But that doesn't mean that it's not a valuable thing to do. So set yourself a little endeavour in the next 3-4 days, in the next week. Whenever you're getting into the spray, you're getting into a tractor, you're messing about with an angle grinder or a PTO, if you just force yourself to take that step, once you start, it will become easier. And then before you know it, you'll be doing it all the time, and everything that you do will be easier moving forward.
My take 5 would be, you know, it's only really 5 seconds. It comes back to the Mind Your Head campaign that's run by Yellow Wellies, encouraging people to wear helmets on quad bikes as a safety campaign, but it only takes 5 seconds, even less than 5 seconds, to stick a helmet on. But you know, when I'm an upland farmer, you take 5 seconds, make sure your brakes are right, your tyres are correct, you're away out to that hill or rough bit of ground with a safe ATV, and you've got your helmet on, you're covering most of the bases, you're away in a safer place than you were if you just jumped on and never thought anything about it.
Thanks so much, guys. And thank you for sharing your stories, because I know to some it's quite tricky to relive those moments and to kind of go back to that place where you nearly lost your lives. But by talking about it to the likes of Luke and myself, it allows us to share it with the wider audience in the agricultural industry, and hope that we can continue making farming a safer place to be.
Bizza, that was a really compelling and honest conversation from Callum and Ed. They've had some really difficult experiences. They've had to deal with them, not just themselves, but also with their family and friends and the impact on them as well. And it was really open of them to share those stories with us.
It was, Luke. And I think people forget that when someone has an accident, whether it be just, I don't know, slicing your hand in the kitchen, it actually affects the other people around you, because you're then reliant on other people. And especially when it comes to something like a farming business, if you are that king or queen pin in the business, you know what's going on, you control the checkbooks, you control that farm, and something happens to you, it is such a huge burden on others around you that you're then reliant on. So I think just making people aware of that it's not the person that it affects, it's the family and friends around as well.
Absolutely. And it's incredibly sad the impact that these fatalities are having on farming communities. Unfortunately, one of those people who've died in the last year, part of a farm fatality, very local to us and linked to my local Young Farmers Club, hugely well respected person within the agricultural community. And the impact that losing these people has on the whole farming industry is absolutely monumental. And we've got to keep talking about it and helping people understand what they can do to make a difference on farms so that we don't have to deal with these horrific situations.
We do. And as we discussed with Ed and Callum, the Take 5 to Stay Alive. And it's the responsibility, Luke, of all of us to make sure that we are making the agricultural industry a safer place to be. If you're listening in the car, if you're listening in the tractor, if you're cooking dinner, just stop and take 5 to think about what you're going to do to make the farm safer for you and everyone else around you as well.
Thanks, Bizza. Before we move on to our next feature, can I just check, Bizza, that your dad's pumpkin seeds are all in order now? I think we had a really good pumpkin crop this year. We know growing crops is very dependent on the weather. We might not be as lucky next year. Those seeds are going to be crucial to growing his next big bumper giant pumpkin.
They are, Luke. I'm hoping as well that the right labels are with the right seeds, because if not, I am in big trouble. And what we think could be a giant pumpkin could actually turn out to be a giant broccoli or a giant squash or a giant marrow. So pray for me if that's not the case. But I do actually have a pumpkin joke just to lighten the mood as we go on to our next segment. Would you like to hear it?
I, of course, want to hear your pumpkin joke.
Okay, Luke, what do you call a fat pumpkin?
I don't know. What do you call a fat pumpkin, Bizza?
A plumpkin.
Excellent. That is on a par with Christmas cracker jokes.
Thank you. It probably came out of one, or it's definitely one of my dad's jokes.
Moving swiftly on from that joke, Bizza, we've got our Westminster team to talk about the family farm tax and a minister's visit to a farm. And we're joined by Scott and Neve.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Westminster segment. This week you've got me, Scott Pepe, External Affairs Manager.
And me, Neve McGinty, also External Affairs Manager.
Now Neve, we've had another very busy week in Parliament. What's been your highlight in terms of parliamentary business?
I think it's definitely got to be Treasury questions this week, hasn't it, Scott? Really delivering prime time television.
Prime time television. And I think the concept of parliamentary questions is quite interesting. Everyone will know that once a week the Prime Minister has to come to Parliament to answer questions. But actually, every 6 weeks or so, every Secretary of State has to come to Parliament. So every 6 weeks, the DEFRA Secretary has to come to Parliament, the Business Secretary. And this week, it was the turn of Rachel Reeves and her ministerial team. And Neve, when we hear ministers are coming, we work very hard, don't we, to work with our MPs that we know the best and try and plant some questions on behalf of the NFU.
Yeah, definitely. We're always watching to see what's coming up in Parliament. And yeah, on the rotation this week was Treasury oral questions. If you've been living under a rock, for your information, we've been having a bit of a disagreement with the Treasury, haven't we, Scott, at the minute? So yeah, we were following this session really, really closely. And basically for the first 15 minutes of Treasury oral questions this week, while Rachel Reeves was sat there in the chamber, MPs focused on the family farm tax. So yeah, the Chancellor and the Treasury Ministers had to sit there while 7 MPs called on them to look again at the Syntax report and get around the table with the farming community.
And the point is that doesn't happen by accident, does it? When we hear that the Chancellor is coming to Parliament, we pick up the phone to those MPs we know best or those MPs who have an interest, and we really try and help them write questions that we think will put pressure on the Chancellor. And as it happened, we had even a couple of Labour MPs this week pushing the Chancellor on the family farm tax. And a couple of those MPs, Neve, you know particularly well because they're on the Food and Farming Fellowship Scheme.
Yeah, I think that was definitely the most interesting part. Obviously, we had 3 Labour MPs stand up and put on record their disagreement with the government's policy. I think it's very, very easy for opposition MPs to do that, but it takes quite a lot for, MPs to critique their own government and their own government's policy. So yeah, we had David Smith, MP for North Northumberland, Mayor Ellis, MP for Ribble Valley, and Terry Jeremy, MP for North Norfolk, all ask questions on the Syntax report, highlighting that it should be those with the broadest shoulders to bear the greatest burden, not cash poor family farms. Mayor Ellis really made the case to the Treasury Minister, Dan Tomlinson, that, we should really be supporting hard work and farmers who are the backbone of this country, and, disagreeing with the approach they've taken on inheritance tax. And yet, really great question from Terry Jeremy as well, asking if the government had assessed the changes to APR and how that impacts the rural economy, and the growth opportunities for rural communities. So yeah, a really good day out of Treasury questions.
It was brilliant, and as you say, quite it is part of the run-of-the-mill for opposition parties to stand up and criticise the government, but to have those Labour MPs, we shouldn't underestimate actually how brave it was for those MPs to stand up in front of Rachel Reeves and directly challenge her policy. And I think you're going to see more and more Labour MPs actually put their head above the parapet in the coming weeks. But that was a really strong show, I think, of the impact of the NFU's work in Parliament to give MPs the information and the confidence they need around the figures to raise that. And I thought what was interesting as well, Rachel Reeves, not brave enough to answer those questions herself. She sent one of her junior ministers, poor Dan Tomlinson, who kept giving the same stock answer. And I think it's fair to say you don't have to be the world's best body language reader to see that some of those Labour MPs found the answers quite unsatisfactory. But Neve, it's not just been in Westminster that it's busy. Yesterday you swapped Westminster for your wellies as you went on a very important visit.
Yeah, that's right, Scott. I think we've been a bit of passing ships at the minute because we've all been here, there, and everywhere. But yeah, we were delighted to host the farmer minister out on farm. Yeah, not the first time, might I add. Obviously, within a week or two of her starting in the role, she'd already been out on a horticulture farm, which is great. But this time, she visited a dairy farm in the beautiful Derbyshire Dales, lovely part of the world, and was joined by the local MP, John Whitby, who we've all got a lot of time for, haven't we? And yet you say I've got wellies, but I was actually really inappropriately dressed for this visit, and actually ended up with cow muck all over my lovely jeans, which was great. But despite that, it was a really good visit. Yeah, the group covered everything from SFI to investment to TB to fairness in the supply chain. And she even got on the milk and parlour, which was really good because, unlike me, she did bring wellies along to the visit. But yeah, seriously, it's so important to have this engagement with the DEFRA ministerial team so early on. It's obviously hard when you spend so much time forming relationships with ministers and then they get reshuffled and you've got to start again. But over the past few weeks, we've had so much FaceTime with the new DEFRA team, which is really good. And long may that continue.
Well, Neve, that sounds really excellent. And you're right that we do lots of ministerial meetings in London. Tom, David, Rachel are always meeting ministers in Westminster, but there really is no substitute for getting ministers out on farm and seeing the impacts at the coalface of government decisions on farm. And if you want to hear more about that visit, then tune in to the President's vlog. There is a part in the vlog from Paul Tompkins, the Dairy Board Chair, talking about that in more detail.
Yeah, so it's been a busy week this week, but what have we got coming up next, Scott?
Yes, Neve, and we've talked a lot about Treasury questions this week, but looking at the parliamentary calendar for next week, I can see that it's DEFRA questions next Thursday. So next Thursday, it'll be the turn of Emma Reynolds, Angela Eagle, and Emma Hardy to come to Parliament and answer questions. So we will be hard at work trying to get lots of questions in. Obviously, about the family farm tax. There's already one MP we know are going to ask about that, but lots of other issues on members' minds. So we'll be trying to get MPs to ask questions about countryside stewardship, about SFI, about fairness in the supply chain. So when we're back on the podcast in a few weeks' time, we'll be able to give you a rundown of all the questions we got planted for DEFRA questions. But obviously 26th of November, it's getting closer, is budget day. And so, Neve, we're doing a lot of work, aren't we, ahead of that, trying to get as many MPs as we can lined up with our asks on the family farm tax.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've obviously seen that at Treasury questions, but there's definitely more work to do. So throw in the kitchen sink at it. A lot of work going on in Westminster. So yeah, we continue.
And, of course, one thing we've done this week is launch another Write to Your MP campaign. This really is turn the screws time, especially if you're listening and you've got a Labour MP. Perhaps you've got a Labour MP and you haven't quite got round to writing to them yet. Well, now is the time to write to your MP. And if you're thinking, I've got a farm to run, I don't have time to write to my MP, then there are lots of resources to help you on NFU Online. Just go to the website and very first on the homepage, you'll be able to see Write to Your MP. And our current campaign is about asking Labour MPs to watch the excellent and very moving Country File piece that was aired a week or two ago. The NFU helped organise that. Obviously, there's an interview with Tom Bradshaw as part of that, and lots and lots of people have taken up that offer. In fact, I think I can say more than 8,000 people have written to their MP asking them to watch this piece. So now really is the time. If you haven't done it, it takes a few minutes. Let's make that number 9,000, 10,000 people writing to their MP. Now really is the most important time to do it. And we'll put a link to how to write to your MP in the show notes. So I think we're coming to time. That is the end of another very busy week in Westminster. Neve, thank you, and speak to everybody very soon.
See you next time.
Thank you to our Westminster team for joining us there. I'm sure it's the same for you, Bizza, but every time I'm out and about in the countryside, it's the first thing that people ask me about and want to talk about now. It's the family farm tax and the impacts it's going to have on them. So it's great to hear from the Westminster team what the NFU has been doing on this really, really important topic. We're going to move on now to our final feature, which is about Agritechnica. We were joined by Matt Tilt, editor of Farm Contractor and Large Scale Farmer magazine, who spoke to us, Bizza, about what the show was and why it meant so much to him.
He did, and it was a great chat. But Luke, I think you would agree with me that neither of us are machinery nerds when it comes to tractors and sprayers and combines. So to actually kind of go back to basics and learn more about the show and the kind of stuff that was there, I think was really beneficial to us and hopefully to those listening that are also in our position.
This episode's Global Ag View feature takes a look at the largest agricultural machinery show in the world, Agritechnica, which is taking place right now as this podcast is released. We're pre-recording with Matt Tilt, editor of Farm Contractor and Large Scale Farmer magazine, and he's going to Agritechnica. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Just tell us, Matt, a bit about you and your involvement in the Agritechnica show.
I won't hand out popcorn and go all the way back, but come from a contracting background in Worcestershire. I've been with the magazine now for 10 years. I've been editor for 5. And we're part of the Tractor of the Year jury, which is one of the big reasons why we go to Agritechnica, because that is, and the winners of that are announced there. But really, there's no reason for anyone interested in agriculture not to go to Agritechnica. It is huge. It's on a scale that I don't think any of us, even people who go to Lama cereals, can really get your head around until you've been there. So.
And what does this show tell you about the direction of travel for farm machinery?
It kind of goes off in all directions. So there are a few things that are kind of becoming clear from a UK point of view, looking at the previews and things like that. Automation that has been continuously developing over the last 10-15 years, getting more and more advanced. Alternative fuels, not just electric, but ideas behind hydrogen as a potential fuel, methane as a potential fuel. Also, one thing I find really interesting in Agritechnica is these ideas that we think aren't relevant to the UK market, and then in a couple of years they become relevant. So at the moment we're seeing companies like Solis, companies like Taffy, who are both Indian manufacturers who haven't really had a foothold in the European market, But now they're offering machines that are suitable for our market, that are backed up by a scale of manufacturing that a lot of manufacturers can't really match. And it's becoming a much more interesting global market where there's a lot of choice available for consumers.
With everything around the budget, upcoming budget review, and obviously the inheritance tax, it's fair to say that people probably aren't investing as much in their farm businesses at the minute. So do you think that this will have an effect on what people are buying in terms of machinery?
The budget definitely is. I mean, confidence in the UK is very low, far lower than it is in some other countries. That is always going to have an impact. One of the benefits of some of these other manufacturers coming into the market is that they can offer machinery at a slightly lower price point, which could give some people options when they're kind of looking at new machinery prices and thinking, oh, I'm not sure. We might want to wait a year to see what we do here. But in the run up to Agritechnica, the German Agricultural Society, DLG, who run the Agritechnica event, they gave a kind of summary of the European market. And the belief seems to be that we've kind of hit the bottom of this dip, and that we are coming out the other side of it. That's obviously going to take time to show itself on farm, to show itself in the UK. But then you look over the Irish Sea to Ireland, and because dairy prices up until recently have been very good, they are investing in machinery. We've seen some movement at the lower horsepower ranges. So it's a really mixed picture, and there's obviously going to be challenges, but I think Agritechnica always kind of seems like a reset. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of new kit there. There's conversations that people can have where they can see new solutions to old problems. They can see ways to ease some of those pressures, or they can see ways to diversify.
Coming on from that, what is the most out there piece of machinery or equipment you have seen at Agritechnica?
There are weird things there. I've seen front-mounted loaders for tractors that extend like a telehandler, which I have no idea what does to the balance of a tractor, but looks very cool and looks awesome. There's the Nexat system, which is basically a 50-meter wide chassis that you can fit drills to, you can fit combines to, you can fit sprayers to, and you're always doing a 50-meter length width down the field, and you just swap the attachment over. Like, really weird, wild things that are perfect for like Eastern Europe, where they've got thousands of hectares, America, where they've got thousands of hectares. But one thing that has stood out to me is that farming always goes in circles. So we talked about autonomy earlier. And in the 1960s, they had wires under the soil that pulled a tractor along, so they would follow the same lines year after year. And that was deemed amazing, but probably not very practical. Now we do that with satellites. Same with direct drilling. Now we do it with new types of metal. We do that with AI to adjust the seed going down the chutes and everything like that. All these weird, wonderful things that we look at and think, there's no way that will ever come to the UK. There's no way we'll see that here. It tends to find its way here, or technology involved in it does. So like just this year, I've seen multiple farms setting up vineyards. 20, 30 years ago, that was an incredibly niche thing to do. Now it's a fairly popular idea of diversification. There's an olive grove in Lincolnshire. We never thought we'd grow olives in the UK, let alone Lincolnshire. I've heard of a rice plantation in Cambridge. So all of this kit that we look at Agritechnica and go, there's no way, that's too weird, that'll never get here. It's surprising how quickly that ends up over the hedge in the next farm, and you're looking over it going, that's a really cool idea, that's a nice way to make some money.
Thank you very much for joining us, Matt. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have safe travels to Hanover in a few days' time. And if anyone's listening to this is at Agritechnica at the moment and has got a long flight or journey home, I think, Matt, you've got a weekly film newsletter called What's in the Scene, which I'm sure people can take inspiration from to pass their time as they travel to and from Germany.
Yeah, if anyone wants to sign up to something free. What's in a Scene is out there and available. So yeah, if you enjoy films as much as you enjoy tractors, I'd go for that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Matt. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. Cheers.
Bizza, it was really helpful to have Matt join us for that conversation. Like you said, I think we'd have probably really struggled if we'd have tried to pretend that we knew lots about the machinery on show. But it's clear the scale of Agritechnica is absolutely off the charts. And I'm sure that everyone that does go is going to have a fantastic time. It sounds like there's so much to see. That brings us to the end of our show. It's been another great episode, hasn't it, Bizza?
Oh, I've loved it. Even though I was a bit under the weather when we were filming some of the features, you carried us through, Luke, and it was just great to hear everyone's stories as per usual.
It really was. We've heard from some really interesting people, and we'll continue to do so on the future episodes. What have you got on this week, Bizza?
A fairly busy week for me, as per usual. As I mentioned, Dad has had an operation, so kind of holding the fort at home with my mum and in London for an event on Wednesday. However, on Saturday, I am heading to kayak across the highest aqueduct in Wales, which I'm pretending to be excited about, but I'm slightly terrified. I'm going with my boyfriend Angus, and all I can say is I hope we have separate kayaks.
I'm sure it will be good fun, and I wish you all the best if you do end up both in the same kayak.
So that's what my week entails. How about you, Luke? What's on?
I've got another really busy week. There's lots of board meetings throughout the week. I'm also in London on Wednesday. I'm actually in Westminster, so perhaps we need to go for a beer afterwards. It'd be good to catch up in person.
That would be so fun. And then we can plan our next episode, which is, I think, around Christmas. And I can tell you some of my wonderful Christmas cracker jokes over a beer.
We will have to see how many people listen to your pumpkin jokes this time as to whether we include Christmas cracker jokes next time, Bizza. But you're absolutely right. We'll be back on just before Christmas. In the meantime, you'll be hearing from our 4 other co-hosts every fortnight. Please make sure you follow and subscribe so you get notified when the new episodes are released, and check out the show notes for any more information about what we talked about today.
Thank you very much, Luke. It's been fab to do another episode with you, and I can't wait for the next one.